It never announces itself as a grave. It arrives as a kiss. You don't hear a warning, you hear a promise. Come closer, it whispers, and every ache will be quiet. You call it passion. Freud called it something darker, a pull beneath pleasure, a drift towards stillness that is not peace. Beyond the pleasure principle, he wrote, there is a strange gravity in the psyche that longs to end the tension of living, to return to the silence before the first cry. He called it the death drive. Do not panic, and do not pretend you haven't met her. She is the voice that tells you to send the message that will explode your life because the explosion will feel like relief. She is the hand that guides you back to the habit that almost ended you, because at least the habit makes sense. She is the tide that pulls when the shore finally looks safe. You think you are choosing love. Often, you are choosing oblivion dressed in red. This is not a sermon against desire. Desire is the animal engine and the sacred flame. But there are nights when desire stops pointing toward life and begins pointing toward a small, perfect annihilation. Clean, uncomplicated, absolute. That is not Eros. That is his quiet twin, the one who smiles while he blows out the light. You know the difference by the morning after. Eros leaves you fuller. Thanatos leaves you empty, and somehow grateful for the emptiness, as if it confirms a secret doctrine you've always carried, that you are meant to be a ruin. No one taught you this doctrine. You absorbed it in rooms where tenderness came with a price tag, in houses where calm was suspicious and chaos smelled like home, in nights where silence felt like judgment and noise felt like love. So you became a storm chaser with a poet's vocabulary. You gave your ruin 1,000 names so you could keep kissing it without admitting the taste. You called it chemistry. You called it fire. You called it your truth. But if you listen closely, beneath the words is a rhythmic click, a mechanical metronome, a compulsion that keeps time while you call it destiny. Freud didn't write about demons. He wrote about repetition. The psyche returns to the scene of the unsolved again and again, as if mastery could be conjured by reenactment. The death drive is not theatrics, it is accounting. It wants the ledger cleared, no tension, no debt, no pulse. And sometimes you help it along. You escalate the fight not because you care, but because the smash offers that blessed vacancy afterward. You drink past the point where taste is a factor, because the blur is simpler than a feeling with edges. You pick the lover who wrecks you because the wreck is familiar, and familiarity feels like faithfulness to a childhood oath you never meant to make. Admit this. Some mornings you wake up and the quiet is unbearable, as if a choir stopped mid-note and left your bones ringing. You cannot stand the ordinary. You invent a cliff and sprint toward it, just to feel the wind again. You think you're hungry for passion. You are starving for intensity because intensity anesthetizes the ache of being alive. Intensity is cheaper than intimacy. It requires no honesty, just velocity. You say the word surrender and the room goes soft. But there are two kinds of surrender. There is the surrender that opens your throat to a hymn, and there is the surrender that hands your keys to the abyss and climbs into the trunk. You have practiced the second kind and called it devotion. It isn't just romance. The same tide pulls in work, in money, in faith. You sabotage when success is within reach, because success would require you to keep living with responsibility, with steadiness, with the quiet terror of being seen. You torch bridges because ash is easier to count than promises. You overpromise because the crash feels cleaner than the slow maintenance of trust. When your friends call it self-destructive, you laugh and pour another glass of denial. But in the mirror, there is a man who knows exactly what he is doing. He is not clumsy, he is precise. He aims at himself with a steady hand, then blames the bullet for obeying. You are not pushed, you sign the waiver. This is the part where you want me to blame her, the person, the temptation, the siren with the eyes that look like a home you never had. I won't. Her here is not a woman. Her is the archetype of your annihilation, sweet, persuasive, exquisitely reasonable. She borrows faces, she uses lips, but she lives in your nervous system. You have loved her for years. You met her when relief meant silence and silence meant safety. You met her when you learned that intensity could drown out the small, persistent truth that something was wrong. You met her when you discovered that a certain flavor of pain felt like belonging. She does not always roar. Sometimes she is tidy. Just one more, she says, and the cliff nods. Just tonight, she says, and the marriage blinks. Just this once, she says, and the future quietly packs a suitcase. You agree because agreeing feels like rest. And rest is the rarest luxury in a life that never taught you how to be still without being scared. Freud wrote about drives like weather systems, pressure gradients moving through the psyche. He did not say you are evil. He said you are pulled. There is mercy in that diagnosis. There is also responsibility. If you are pulled, you can plant anchors. If you are pulled, you can learn the pattern of the tide and step where the undertow is weakest. If you are pulled, you can choose which voice gets the last sentence. But first, honesty. You adore the edge. Not because you are brave, but because the edge relieves you of the burden of choice. At the edge, the decision is already made. Gravity does the work while you pose as tragic. It's exhausting to live like this. It's also addictive. You earn applause from an audience that worships spectacle, and you call the applause proof. You post the wreckage and call it authenticity. You gather around others who burn and claim you belong to a tribe of phoenixes. But watch closely. Real phoenixes rise. You've been rehearsing the ashes. There is another kind of heat that does not devour. You have seen it and fled because it asked you to stay. It asked for a calendar instead of fireworks. It asked for your mornings. It asked for 1,000 small repairs and promised you nothing viral in return. You accused it of being boring. But boredom is often your word for safety before your nervous system learns the taste. I won't flatter you. You are talented at ruin. You can take a good thing, any good thing, and teach it to bleed. You can dress the wound in poetry so no one notices that the room smells like iron. You do it because it works. It empties you out. For a moment, there is no need to perform the miracle of being a person. No need to hold the contradictions. No need to remain when you want to run. No need to admit that love is heavy and holiness is slow. People talk about chasing highs as if the chase were the point. It's not. You're chasing silence. The high is a tunnel to quiet. The irony is that the tunnel collapses and the noise on the other side is louder than before. So what does it mean to surrender without dying? What does it mean to meet desire without offering it your throat? First, it means you stop lying about what you like. You like risk. You like edges. You like the way danger makes your heart behave like a drumline. Name it without romance. Call it weather and watch how naming a storm starts to shrink it. Then it means you learn the difference between hunger and compulsion. Hunger asks. Compulsion commands. Hunger leaves you more human when it's fed. Compulsion leaves you hollow and dramatic. You already know the voice of compulsion. It never negotiates. It presses. It wants now. It swears there is no later. It argues that anyone asking you to wait is trying to steal your life. Wait anyway. Not forever. Just long enough to discover whether this heat is a hearth or a fuse. Desire that leads to life can stand 5 minutes of breath. Desire that leads to death requires combustion on demand. You crave ritual but pretend you hate rules. Ritual is how a man like you keeps fire and stops worshipping arson. Ritual is how you carry heat through winter without burning your house to the ground. Ritual is how you make a mouth for Eros to sing through that isn't a scream. Build altars that aren't made of sirens. Work that costs sweat. Practice that stacks days. Silence that doesn't punish. Brotherhood that doesn't applaud your spirals. Beauty that demands patience to enter. These are not punishments. These are levees. And learn to mistrust the moment right after triumph. Victory tastes like relief, and relief is the moment your death drive makes the most sense. You will want to throw something precious into the sea just to feel the ache again. Do not. Let the ache be. Let the ordinary be a crown instead of a cage. You will say you can't. You can. Your nervous system is not a tyrant. It is a student. Teach it with repetition what it learned with shock. Teach it that nights can end quietly and mornings can arrive slowly, and your heart does not have to be a siren to be heard. There is a myth you've been living, that you are the kind of person who feels more than others. Maybe, but intensity without stewardship is just theater. Stewardship turns volume into music. Every orchestra has timpani. The point isn't to hit them all the time. Imagine, for a minute, that the absence of calamity is not the absence of meaning. Imagine that the lack of adrenaline is not the lack of love. Imagine that the most erotic word you'll ever speak is tomorrow. I will not pretend this is easy. Part of you will mourn the carnival. Part of you will miss the dangerous applause. Part of you will stand in a quiet kitchen with a decent person and think, is this it? And then, if you keep standing there, something unspectacular will begin to glow. Consistency will turn into intimacy. Trust will grow heavy enough to lean on. Laughter will come from deeper in the body. Sex will lose its courtroom and become a language for something that doesn't need verdicts. You will look at your own hands and realize they are no longer weapons you hide behind metaphors. There will still be nights the old tide tugs. It always will. Thanatos is patient. He waits at the edge of fatigue and triumph and boredom and grief. He waits at the doorway when you come home after a long day and the house is quiet and the phone is loud. He waits when your lover's face is turned away and you invent an enemy out of silence. You will feel the pull to end the tension violently. Breathe until ending is not the only verb you remember. Go outside. Touch something living that doesn't care about your drama. Eat. Sleep. Speak slowly to someone who refuses to be impressed by your urge to disappear. You call that weakness. It's strength with better taste. And when you fail, and you will, because you are human, and the tide sometimes wins, fail forward. Do not romanticize the relapse. Do not make a poem out of a wound and post it for worshippers. Do not build a museum of your ruins and sell tickets. Sweep. Apologize like a builder, not a beggar. Repair like a man who knows the house is worth it. There is a quiet heroism in people who keep living. They do not trend. They do not glow against the night with neon warnings. They make breakfast. They tell the truth. They do not confuse pain with depth. They do not audition for tragedy. They choose a sacred, stubborn aliveness and defend it with ordinary acts. You have wanted to be a legend. Be a legacy instead. Legends burn, legacies shelter. Some will mock this. They will say you got soft. They will say you traded the river for a fence. They will say you stopped being interesting when you stopped being on fire. Let them be entertained by their funerals. You are building a life. Lives are interesting to the people inside them. Freud handed you a difficult mercy. Your longing for destruction is not proof of evil. It is proof of fatigue. He did not ask you to hate yourself. He asked you to stop mistaking the urge to stop feeling for a holy call. He asked you to recognize that the part of you aching for quiet can find it without burning down the cathedral. You want an altar? Try a breath you do on purpose. Try a bedtime you protect like an oath. Try a craft that punishes you with boredom and rewards you with peace. Try telling someone you trust that there is a flaw in you that sometimes opens and you need them to stand in the doorway until it closes. And for the love of everything you say you love, stop making your lovers responsible for your tide. They are not your levees. They are not your lifeguards. They can stand with you on shore, but they cannot swim the undertow for you. There is a point where you must choose to live, not loudly, not for applause. As a vow you renew in secret, at sinks and in chairs and in conversations where you refuse to escalate for the illusion of power. A man who chooses to live becomes extremely inconvenient to his own mythology. The tragic roles no longer fit. The poetry has to grow up. The metaphors have to work a day job. You'll think you've lost your edge. You haven't. You've found your center. Edges drift. Centers hold. One day, if you keep choosing, you will walk past the old door and feel the old pull and smile because you can feel it without moving. You will remember the years you mistook dying slowly for loving deeply. You will remember the faces you used as masks for your own hunger. You will send a blessing in their direction and a warning into the air. Not today, not again, not me. Because this is what it really means to surrender correctly, to let go of the melodrama and offer yourself to the boring miracle of staying. Stay when the quiet insults your addiction. Stay when the urge to ruin masquerades as destiny. Stay when your skin begs for the high that will leave it empty. Stay until the staying becomes a song. If this voice found you at the edge tonight, take it as a hand, not a rescue, a reminder. There is nothing romantic about disappearing. There is nothing noble about calling your exhaustion a calling. There is nothing inevitable about becoming a cautionary tale. Stand up, turn away from the rail, walk the long way home. Wash your face, drink water, tell someone who tells the truth that you almost went over. Listen while they don't clap. And if you make it through the night, and you will wake into a morning that doesn't taste like ash. It will be plain. It will be quiet. You will think nothing is happening. Everything is happening. This is how a man divorces the abyss without losing the sea. This is how a man keeps desire and refuses death. This is how a man grows strong enough to carry joy without dropping it for spectacle. If this struck bone, don't let it evaporate into another good intention you forget by noon. Anchor it. Tell the room that taught you to worship flames that you're building a hearth. Tell the mirror you're done being interesting to strangers. Tell the tide you have learned its schedule and you're tired of drowning. And if you want others off that rail with you, pass the warning. Not as virtue, as weather. Storm coming, you'll say, and hands will move. And men who used to think silence was a coffin will learn it is a cradle. Let the death drive starve. Feed the life you keep threatening to begin. Then begin. You don't need the cliff to prove you're alive. You need the ground to build the future your ruin kept stealing. Choose it while your heart is still a drum and your throat can still sing. Top of form, bottom of form.